I know it is not 9 p.m., but I have to do an early history and politics because Donald Trump and MAGA have not let me down. Um, this is definitely going to be a period and presidency and era with a name. Donald Trump is not going to slow down. Um, he's pulling back on some stuff that's going horribly wrong, but he has so many bad plans. This Project 2025, they're really going to try to do. I do not understand why Congress is so quiet. But the new news is this fact sheet that has come from the White House. It is, let me see. I want to make sure you guys can see this. All right. The fact sheet, President Donald J. Trump strengthens America's law enforcement to pursue criminals to protect innocent citizens. Okay. Number one, who is a criminal? Um, Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested many times. Is he a criminal? Frederick Douglass was considered a fugitive from justice. He was a criminal. Um, Malcolm X. Anybody who went against Plessy versus Ferguson was breaking the law. They were considered criminals. This is this country's history, by the way. For that matter, the colonists that broke away from England were considered criminals because they were breaking English common law. Who is and who is not a criminal is a matter of perspective and history, depending on who wrote the history. So, criminals. Who are criminals? Is the CIA criminals because they control the drug movement around the world? Look up the history of the CIA if you don't know that. Is the American government criminals because the last time they did this, they actually apologized for the war on drugs and how it disproportionately focused on the Black community? Are they criminals? So, what's the difference between a criminal and people committing criminal acts and apologizing for it and not receiving punishment, but still causing more devastation than the people who were alleged to be criminals? Protect. The Black community was not protected in the 1994 crime bill, which is why so many presidents and congresspeople and politicians apologize for it, because citizens were not protected. But how in the world they expected Black citizens to be protected by the 1994 crime bill when the war on drugs was a war declared against the American people? How can you declare war on the American people and yet protect them? And then we have to look at the word citizen. Who are the citizens, and do we have equal citizenship? We know women didn't. White women didn't until 1920. Black women didn't until 1965. Native Americans didn't until 1968. Black men didn't until 1965. Other immigrant-born people did not have, or immigrants did not have, equal protection under the law until 1964. Now, granted, We did have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments in 1865, 1868, and 1870, respectively. But they weren't followed for 100 years. They were actually ignored. And we ended up having to do legislation at the end of the civil rights era to get those ignored amendments restored or at least activated. So, citizenship has not been a consistency in American history. So, who are these citizens and what are we doing here? And this is from the White House. This is President Donald J. Trump's site. This is from the White House. This is their spin. This is not CNN. This is not Fox. If you have a problem with this, this came from the president's office. Bottom line. April 28th, 2025. Look it up yourself. This way you don't have to go into, oh, well, they're trying to. No, it's come. It's what the president is putting out to represent himself. So it is what it is. Empowering law enforcement to protect communities. Which communities? Spell it out. Say it. Today, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order to empower state and local law enforcement to relentlessly pursue criminals and protect American communities. Again, who are these criminals and what communities? Are you going to police the same? Are you going to police violently? Are you going to militarize the policing? These are the questions that are not some of the brightest minds in America have influence over these publications. Not in there. More specifically, something specific, the order to direct the Attorney General to create a mechanism to provide legal resources and indemnification for officers facing unjust legal expenses from official duties, including pro bono assistance. Now, who determines what is unjust? It's right here. To now again, but that's talking about the police officers. We haven't talked about the citizens. Maximize the use of federal resources to improve training, increase officer pay and benefits, and strengthen legal protections. Seek tougher sentences for crimes against officers, enhance prison security capacity, and improve crime data uniformity. Now, what is improved crime data uniformity? Are we saying that there's not going to be exclusive arrests and violence and financial incentives for arrests in Black communities? Are we saying that? I would like to hear that. But other than that, everything that we've written so far is about empowering police officers, not protecting the citizens. I'm just telling you, they get to choose. These are Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, University of Michigan, Columbia University scholars that are writing this. And the first two things that they put on there was about empowering police, not the people. So this has happened before in my lifetime. We're not talking about black and white history. We're not talking about the civil rights. We're talking about 1994 up until 2000. So if you're 50 years old, you lived through the last time this happened, so you know what can happen. And we've had decades of presidents apologize for this. So just see what you're looking at. You're reading it now. Review federal consent decrees, out-of-court agreements, and post-judgment orders involving state or local law enforcement agencies and modify and rescind any that impede the performance of law enforcement functions. Unfortunately, historically, law enforcement functions have been abusive in particular communities. This is not something I'm making up. Go to civil rights movement and look and see who are the people with the dogs, Who are the people with the billy clubs? Who are the people with the water hoses? Who are the people attacking the peaceful protest over in Selma going over the bridge? Police officers have historically in our country been used to enforce the politics of the state. That's 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 on camera. You can't argue with me on that. That's what it is. So um, when we're talking about impeding the performance of law enforcement functions, what functions? We got to look at not just politics, but history. Okay. Increase the provision of surplus military assets to support law enforcement and evaluate their use in crime prevention. They did this before. We're talking military assets. A lot of people have seen the movie Boys in the Hood, and it starts off with a tank coming down the street in South Central doing a drug bust. Were there any tanks in Dartmouth, Massachusetts? Were there any tanks in Manhattan? Were there any tanks in upstate New York? Were there any tanks in downtown Chicago? No. The tanks were in Gary, Indiana. The tanks were in South Central Illinois. South Central California. The tanks were in Watts. The tanks were in Little Rock, Arkansas. The automatic weapons, all of these things, the riot gear, all of that stuff were in small Black communities. So then we have to ask, how did the drugs get there when there are no borders to states where the drugs come from? They got all the way through the country, but you didn't police it until it got into the Black community. Okay. Use recently established Homeland Security Task Force to advance federal and local coordination. Okay, so now we have the federal government joining in on local policing. What is happening? Crime is not our biggest issue right now. Think about it. Everybody freeze. Even if you live in the hood, is crime the biggest thing going on right now, or food? Are drugs the biggest thing going on right now? Shootings, even in the hoods, it's not like it was in the 80s. And remember, the 80s wasn't like it was until they did the war on drugs. They did the war on drugs 5 years before drugs hit the street. They were saying drugs was this big problem. It was under Ronald Reagan. This is drugs. And then they put the egg in the skillet. This is your brain on drugs. 3% of the country felt that drugs was a major problem. And then the country did something to make it a major problem. Crime is not our number one problem. He didn't run on a platform of crime. He didn't. So why is it now crime is just off the chain? That we have to put all these resources. And again, I'm down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're 5 down, and he has not mentioned the American people. We're 5 down, and all of this is talking about increasing policing. And we're about to find out why. Keeping Americans safe. It empowers law enforcement to do their jobs, relentlessly pursue criminals, and protect innocent citizens. What other kind of citizens are they? But okay. Were the citizens the ones that they apologized to for the problems going wrong? Okay. Millions of Americans live in fear, worried that surging crime will destroy their lives, homes, and businesses. Who? Who? Who is this that's living in fear? Now, think about how racism affects people, Black people. It affects their jobs, it affects their abilities to get mortgages, it affects their education, it affects where they live, it affects their safety. The only way racism appears in lives of white Americans is one way: fear. They have a fear that Black folks are going to do something. They have a fear that their property value is going to go down if Black folks live in their neighborhood. So when you hear that word fear, it's a code word, it's a dog whistle to white concerns. Black folks ain't scared of nothing. We done been through slavery, we done been through Jim Crow, we done been through segregation, we have been through the war on drugs, we've been through mass incarceration. What are we scared of? You can't scare us as a whole. Just how it is. It's just something else to deal with. But our Black politicians that have bought into this crime and I'm not concerned with crime in neighborhood, then Putin, Baltimore is 20th century, is off the hook. But let's read more. Let's read more. Let's not see where the president's going. Crime increases when local leaders demonize law enforcement and impose legal and political handcuffs that make aggressively enforcing the law impossible. Reversing this dynamic is essential in restoring public safety. Crime for decades, and since, W.B. Du Bois's work at the turn of the century, the Kerner Report ordered under LBJ in the 1960s, all have said consistently that crime is an economic issue. Generally, it's an economic issue. The height of it, or it being condensed, or its presence is elevated with economics, the jobs, inflation. When people don't have resources, crime begins to happen. This is irresponsible. This is an irresponsible definition of crime. Crime increases when local leaders demonize law enforcement and impose legal and political handcuffs. That's not consistent with economic education. That's not consistent with political education. That's not considered consistent with socioeconomic scholarship. In the White House has some of the best educated people in place. Democrats' soft on crime policies have fueled chaos. Wasn't he president before the last guy? Many local jurisdictions, officers are forced to comply with DEI policies or are wrongly accused of misconduct, which diverts their attention to fighting crime. Okay, What does DEI have to do with the price of tea in China? That's funny when they're talking about police chiefs that mess up, it's the DEI issue. When it's not, when they don't mess up, it's so what? White supremacy good thing? I don't know. Um, some use bail reform to free dangerous felons without ensuring they face leaving communities vulnerable to repeat offenders. Some ignore shoplifting, vagrancy, and urban encampments, allowing disorder to spread unchecked in cities. Certain jurisdictions excuse violent riots when it is fashionable to demonize law enforcement, like January 6th, or when it was good people on either side. Um, which one are we talking about? And it says stopping crime and upholding justice. President sealed the border to initiate the largest deportation operation in U.S. history to remove illegal. Haven't they moved under? They've only removed like 100 people. I mean, under 100 people. That's just not consistent. Um, Creating a task force to make Washington, D.C. safe and beautiful. Why not the country? Are you only the president in Washington, D.C.? Um, International cartels and other violent organizations as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists. Why are we worried about terrorists outside when we have domestic terrorists here? Now, the domestic, we worried about international cartels, but the people who stormed the Capitol were Americans and we pardoned them. Okay. Um, Using federal resources to combat the explosion of anti-Semitism in our campuses and our streets. Okay. So we can tell who is funding the Trump administration. Um, I don't know that I've ever heard Trump say anything about anti-Semitism. Even further, I don't remember Trump mentioning a university being a problem, particularly withholding the resources from a particular university, being Harvard, until they had a black president. Now that's just a fact. There's nothing that we can change around to get around that. When she had a issue on her campus that she chose to handle the way she chose to handle it, suddenly it became a anti-Semitism issue, which is really odd because Jewish people are a very small number of Semitic people. Most Semitic people are black people, and most Semitic people are Muslim because Semitic is a region with a language and it's an area. It's not a group of people. And Semites are not even mostly Jewish people. Jewish people have American white Jewish people have sequestered this representation when that's like black people saying, if you do something against black people, American black people, you don't like all Americans, and we only 12% of the population. So I appreciate the spin, but I'm telling you all, the Democrats wouldn't have done anything any better. They would have done it differently, but they would have extracted just as much money out of the black community, poor community, Latino community. They would have given hardships to immigrants and only worried about one border. That's not the issue. The good thing is that this particular president has a personality that he's going to say what he's doing. And over his 100 days, I really found it to be extremely interesting that he told when they asked him, he said, "Well, your approval rate is really down. A lot of conservatives and MAGA people are changing their minds," and he said, "I don't care." I'm paraphrasing. This is what I told him I was going to do. So if you don't like it now, it's not my problem. Now that I respect 100%. And I really didn't think that they were going to really try to carry out this Project 2025. And they're tripping all over themselves trying to do it. They're sending the wrong people out of the country, and now they got to get them back. And now they're arresting judges because the judges won't go along because they didn't think about the fact that it's three parts of government. Okay? Executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch. Judicial branch, legislative branch sets the laws and allocates money. Executive branch spends the money and enforces the laws. The Supreme Court, the judicial branch, interprets the laws and sets them. One makes them, one interprets them and sets them. Other one enforces them. Okay, that's three. Legislative, they set up money, make money available. The executive branch spends it. So that's called the system of checks and balances. They are trying to push things through that are causing the other branches to trip and fall over process. So now you're seeing how this stuff is falling all over itself. And honestly, I think this is not gonna. This is really not going to hold. I think they're doing this to make racist whites proud. They're making America feel great again, but they're you still can't afford gas, you still can't afford groceries, you still can't afford rent. The economy is doing bad, but it's not doing bad enough to really hurt the poor people yet. It's hurting the middle people, and the middle people are raising the prices on the poor people. So the poor people are struggling, but we can still barely pay it. The problem happens not when the middle class is losing money, and definitely not when the upper class is losing money, because the Tesla guy has lost 133 billion. What is this? I see judges violating the law and aiding and abetting illegal immigrants. Well, you have to think about what is the job of a judge? A judge's job is to interpret the law. Okay? So if the judge interprets the law a particular way and rules the way that he feels is consistent with the law, there's a system in place. It's called an appellate court. You don't arrest the judge. You send it to the Court of Appeals. And if the Court of Appeals doesn't go with it, it goes up to the Supreme Court, either the state Supreme Court or the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, depending on which jurisdiction it's under. There is a system in place. You have to prove that the judge did something that is not legal. But if it's not legal, he doesn't go to jail. There may be a misinterpretation of the law. That's why we have appellate courts. So this is, you can't just read a headline. We have to know what the three branches of our government is for and how they're supposed to function. When they say, when you're in high school history class and they say we have a system of checks and balances, apply what you're learning. Because these headlines are going to tell you something against the basic facts of our government. So who is in a better position to say a judge broke the law? A politician or a judge? A judge is an attorney that has gotten so good at what they do, they have been elected by their peers to oversee other attorneys in their practice. That's what a judge does, make sure that policies and procedures are followed under the law. So just because you're told that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's true, because some things just don't sound right. And if you don't know how the court systems work, it doesn't sound odd to you when politicians are intervening. So, you got to tighten up on your game in how our country works before we take these political stances. Now you can ask, hey, did these judges do this, or why did they arrest these judges? But to make a demonstrative statement that that's what they're doing, that puts you in a position to get embarrassed, because that's just not so. But this whole Project 2025, I don't think that's going to work. I'm going to tell you why. Structurally, there is no successor to Donald Trump. There's no successor. That's a problem with, I don't want to say a dictatorship or totalitarian government. There is no, Donald Trump, by way of his personality, does not, even his kids aren't his successors, which is strange. You would think he would be bringing this for him to control further, but no. This is how much damage can you do in 4 years to this country? This is a very resilient country. And if he hurts the poor enough, they're going to swing. They did it with Obama. Think about it. You think these people love Trump? No, they don't. People love themselves. That's why the Civil War was what it was. Those people the white people wasn't fighting for black folks. The only people fighting for black folks in the Civil War were the black folks. People are worried about their own politics, their own food, their own property. That's what they worry about. And when Donald Trump does enough to endanger that, they're going to swing the other way. Same thing happened with Bush too. When he wrecked the economy, everybody went to the Democrat. And then once people got food in their stomachs and everything got back to normal financially, okay, we went back to our racial ideologies and we swung to Trump. And Trump would have done 2 terms if he had not messed up on COVID, which was not his fault. He couldn't have saw that coming. Nobody could have saw that coming. So that's where that swing took. And then you had Biden, who I definitely was not impressed with. He might as well just had another Republican. And it swung the other way. Harris didn't have a chance. So this is either going to go one or 2 ways. It's going to go all the way to the right, like it did in the 80s and 90s, because even the Democrats in the 90s were right. That's where the 1994 crime bill came about, which is the same thing as this. This is it. And if the Democrats fall in line to what happened, if this takes off, because now you also understand nothing in this is talking about the American people. All this is talking about policing. And none of it is saying evening policing. None of this is saying addressing historic disparities in policing. None of it is saying that. When you're talking about fear, you're talking about white concerns. Some judges think they are above the law, like the judge who was convicted of Cash for Kids. You have bad people everywhere, but what we're talking about is the system. We're talking about the system. The system of checks and balances is what it is. We have a place for judges who hold rulings that we feel are inconsistent with the law. That is not a criminal intervention unless there is some illegal dealings with that. But the system that is in place to address outcomes that are inconsistent with the law is the appellate courts. So we can find an exception to everything. I mean, John Brown was a white man that led a slave revolt. Now, how many times in history has that happened? We can find the exception in the rule, but what we're talking about commonly, this is how the system is designed to work. So again, look out for what is coming in front of you. And that's the whole reason why we started History and Politics. I'm gonna tell you, Donald Trump has been wonderful for this channel to have a focal point on taking current politics and adding a historic framework to it. One, this has happened before. Two, when it happened before, it only happened to certain people. And it only happened, you know what? The last time this happened, this was in response to drugs. The drug epidemic that's going on right now is fentanyl and opioids, and that's in mostly white communities. It's Donald Trump. Why isn't drugs mentioned in this policing decree? Huge epidemic of opioids, huge epidemic of fentanyl, and you're going to get tough on criminals, but you're not saying which criminals, because you know that black folks are not making fentanyl and they don't use it, and we don't have the benefits to get prescription medicines. That's not in our neighborhoods. If you're going to police that, you will not be in black neighborhoods. Because when they did it for drugs, they were doing it for the drugs in the black neighborhood. Now we're just going to say crime. Why would you not do drugs again? It's a shame that so many people are dying from it. There's still as many people dying from fentanyl and opioids as it was crack. But we're not policing that. Again, this is a short 30 years ago. I was grown when this happened. So not only was it in the black community, not only was it specific for drugs, it was to increase the prison population. What was the first thing Donald Trump was talking about in February? Convict leasing, sending American prisoners to El Salvador. So now you want to fill up the prisons again. Are we going to put them back into, we're going to put them back to labor like we did in the war on drugs, or are we going to send them all to El Salvador? Look at the game. I'm not the one here preaching. I didn't vote for him. I would not have voted for Harris. I don't vote. I'm beyond voting. If you read the autobiography of Malcolm X, if you want to understand black folks in voting, read Malcolm X's speech on the ballot or the bullet if you want to understand why I don't vote. But I don't. It's a waste of time. For black people, voting is majority rule. We're 12% of the population. We'll never get specific things for us. Black folks get things through protest, education, economic segregation. That's how we got this. We've been able to vote for 160 years, roughly 155. Name one thing black people have gotten through voting. I'll wait, put it in the chat. Nothing. Not through exclusively voting. Voting is majority rules. We have a very unique history, which means we have very unique needs. So it's just not going to help us. But this crime doctrine that has been put out just now, I'm telling you in the beginning, this is not new. This happened in 1994 with a very popular president then. They were calling him the black president. Clinton, Bill Clinton. But again, how much, this doesn't seem to be a competent administration. So they're falling all over themselves coming out of the gate. So I don't think that this stuff is going to substantively change America. I don't think it's going to really hurt the larger group of people. I think it's just feeding into racist ideologies. It's going to be what it is. But what I will tell you is the fact that they have no successor. This is just going to be a speed bump